Good evening, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska. You can get updates to our forecast or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we may have out for your area. You can also call our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391, getting updates to the forecast through that means as well. Or you can email me at the address at the bottom of the screen, david.kramer@noaa.gov. Taking a quick look at the advisories that we do have out. These are both focused primarily around the Susitna Valley area, and one is from the areas from Wasilla further to the east and then, or further to the west, and then extending throughout the Susitna Valley, where we are expecting high snow amounts anywhere from 6 to 13 inches in the area. These are both going to be valid from 6 a.m. on Saturday until 6 a.m. on Monday. Again, this is for areas from Wasilla to the west to include all of the Susitna Valley, and we are having, or both of those are winter weather advisories for snow. If you remember from yesterday, we also had a high wind warning in the Juneau and Douglas area, and we did get some reports of some damage in the area, and we also have reports of wind speeds up to around 70 knots. So we'll give some credit here to Jay Beadle. We appreciate him sending in some images from near his area on Shelter Island that he sent into the Weather Service. So we have some trees that were blown down by those strong winds, again up to as high as around 70 knots. This is on Shelter Island where a tree fell and damaged this home, and then out another, or same area, but we had another tree that fell from those strong winds. Pretty big trees falling in the area due to those high winds through the area. We had reports all around town, and even in the Juneau area itself, we did have reports of some power outages from some trees and power lines. So a lot of damage from this systems. If you get reports from any advisories or watches or warnings that we have out for your area, feel free to send them in. Again, you can email me at the address that was on the bottom of our screen, david.kramer@noaa.gov. We appreciate any updates that we can get on any of our products. So taking a look now at our satellite imagery, we can see that we have one system approaching the western Aleutian Islands, bringing some cloud cover and some precipitation to the area, some snow further north. And as we get out by the central Aleutian Islands, a little bit warmer there, expecting some rain. Looking back out over mainland Alaska, we have a weaker system moving over southwest Alaska, bringing some precipitation to the area, and a weaker frontal boundary that's pushing through the Kodiak Island area. One of the things that we can note is how we did have all this area from the high pressure being protected from any cloud cover, staying pretty dry, but also staying pretty cold. Now we're getting a push of clouds over the area, help to warm us up a little bit. And then as we look down in the Juneau area, some lower clouds in much of the area, bringing some lighter areas of precipitation. As we look for precipitation for the remainder of the day in the central and northern parts of the Panhandle, we are expecting to see some snow. A little bit further to the south and closer towards the Gulf, some of that's going to mix with rain, especially at the lower elevations. Looking out over mainland Alaska, still dominated primarily by the high pressure, even though we have some of that cloud cover moving in. So pretty dry for south central Alaska, the interior up along the Arctic coastline. But as we get by the west coast of the state, we are expecting snow all the way down into the Bristol Bay area and southern portions of Kodiak Island. Our system that's south of the Alaska Peninsula, weakening pretty rapidly here, but still bringing some of the snow a little bit further to the north. Behind this system, it's a little bit of warmer air. We are seeing rain in the Alaska Peninsula out through the eastern and central Aleutian Islands. Still cold enough for the western Aleutians to have snow, but we do see a warm push coming in with this next system. And then scattered snow showers throughout much of the Bering Sea. Moving into tonight, our western system is going to push with the frontal system through southern portions of the Bering Sea out over the central Aleutian Islands, extending rain through, or heavier rain through the eastern Aleutians towards the Alaska Peninsula. Behind this, some showers coming in with the rain, starting to wrap in some of that colder air, transitioning some of the rain back to snow or a mix of snow and rain for the western Aleutian Islands. As we move up to the west coast of the state, we have a low sitting out over the Bristol Bay area, with the trough extending into southern portions of the interior, where we will see snow expected from Bristol Bay up into areas of the central and western part of the interior, along the west coast as well, extending snow up towards the Point Hope area. Along the Arctic coastline still should be pretty dry, eastern portions of the interior as well. Let's get down into south central Alaska. We are expecting snow from Kodiak Island area throughout portions around Cook Inlet, extending up into the Susitna Valley out through Prince William Sound as well. And then down in the Panhandle area, northern portions are expecting to see snow, and that's extending out towards Yakutat. Other precipitation should stay out over the Gulf for tonight. As we move into Saturday, southern portions of the Panhandle still looking to be pretty dry. As we get further to the north, we are expecting to see snow in areas closer towards the Gulf, a little bit warmer there, expecting to see that mix of snow and rain. All along the North Gulf Coast, expecting to see snow down through Kodiak Island. This does include Kenai Peninsula up through the Susitna Valley, and then we do have further out west, low pressure out over the Bristol Bay area is going to continue to linger through the day on Saturday, extending the snow up into the portions of the western and central interior, and we will also have snow up by southern portions of the Brooks Range out by the upper Yukon Valley. On the other side of the Brooks Range, still going to be pretty dry, but as we drop down to the west coast, we will see snow developing on the southern portions of the Seward Peninsula down the west coast of Alaska. And our all low is starting to fall apart and fill as we move into the Bering Sea, but we will still have enough push of moisture to have some rain for the western and central Aleutian Islands, out by the eastern Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula as well. Further to the north, a little bit colder, a mix of rain and snow expected for the Pribilofs. As we look into Sunday, that system will push off further to the east, starting to bring in some colder air with that northerly flow, transitioning over to snow for the western and central Aleutian Islands. So you get further to the east, still a little bit warmer, mix of snow and rain is expected through the Alaska Peninsula. As we look out over the west coast, we still have the low near that Bristol Bay area, still bringing a lot of snow to the YK Delta, down into Bristol Bay, through the Aleutian Range and for Kodiak Island, extending the snow line to southern portions of the interior out into eastern portions of the interior as well. Up along the Arctic coastline, just central portions going to see some lighter snow up there, but south central Alaska still expecting to see snow with multiple waves pushing through on Sunday, continuing to reinforce the snow, especially for the Susitna Valley area where we do have the winter weather advisory out for snow. And then down in the Panhandle area, northern locations, expecting to see snow, and finally extending the precipitation down to southern locations in the Panhandle as well, with a mix of snow and rain expected there. So for our temperatures, starting with our low temps on Saturday morning, in the Panhandle area, mid-20s in the southern portions of the Panhandle, into the teens as we get further to the north. Teens along the coastline, but dropping down into the single digits for places around Cook Inlet and up into the Mat-Su valleys. Colder in the Copper River Basin, -13 at Glen Allen, and then staying in the negative teens for much of the interior as we get further to the north, -20s, and then on -20s on the Arctic coastline as well, till we get further to the west, a little bit warmer in the -teens. Negative single digits for the Kotzebue Sound, positive single digits for much of the Norton Sound area, Unalakleet a little bit colder, -1, and then down into the Bristol Bay area, warming up for those low temps into the teens. For the Aleutian Islands, Alaska Peninsula, into the 30s, getting warmer as we get closer towards the central Aleutian Islands, and then 33 degrees for that low for St. Paul. For our afternoon highs for Saturday afternoon, getting up into the 40s for the central and eastern Aleutian Islands. On Alaska, getting up to 43 degrees. Staying pretty cold there at St. Paul, not hitting freezing, just staying below at 31 degrees expected high. Bristol Bay area into the 30s. King Salmon a little bit warmer there, 37 degrees. To the teens for the YK Delta area, dropping down as we get further to the north, as we get into the Kotzebue Sound area, getting to the single digits. But getting above zero at Kotzebue, 1 degree above zero is expected. Point Hope, 1 degree below zero. And along the Arctic coastline, negative single digits until we get out by Kaktovik, staying at -10 there. Into the Brooks Range, negative single digits, but as we drop into the interior, afternoon highs are going to get above zero, with some places in the southern and eastern locations getting more into the teens. South central Alaska in the 20s for the most part, still colder in the Copper River Basin. And then we have Cordova getting up a little bit warmer, right at freezing, 32 degrees is expected. Down in the Alaska Peninsula or Panhandle, we are going to get into the 30s, warmer as we get further to the south, with Ketchikan getting up to 39 degrees. Sunday morning lows, we do have into the 20s for most locations in the Panhandle, Yakutat down to 28 degrees. Into the teens for places along the Gulf for south central Alaska as we get further to the north, dropping down into the single digits, colder in the Copper River Basin, -11 expected low there. In the interior, southern locations right around zero, but dropping down into the teens below zero as we get further to the north, and then into the 20s as we get by the Brooks Range, with Bettles and Fort Yukon both at -20, and then up along the Arctic coastline in the -20s till we get out by the west coast, where it is going to be a little bit warmer, staying right around -10 degrees for the Kotzebue Sound area, right around zero for the Norton Sound area. Single digits above zero for the YK Delta, and then much warmer on the Bristol Bay side, with that warmer air coming from the south into, or only dropping down into the 20s for those lows, and then into the mid-30s all along the Aleutian Islands, with the Pribilofs dropping down into the mid-20s. And Sunday afternoon, getting up above freezing for the Pribilof Islands, getting into the upper 30s for the Aleutians, into the mid-30s for the Bristol Bay area, into the teens for the YK Delta, dropping down to single digits for the Seward Peninsula, and then below zero all along the Arctic coastline for those highs. All above zero as we drop to the southern side of the Brooks Range, increasing as we get further to the south into the 20s for south central Alaska, and above freezing all throughout the Panhandle area, with Ketchikan being the warmest there at 39 degrees.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen with your look at flying weather. Starting out Saturday morning, we'll see IFR conditions on the front and back sides of a low around the Aleutians. So western Aleutians and through the Bering Sea and into the central Aleutians, IFR conditions. Also IFR spreading from Bristol Bay northward and inland to about the Yukon River. Also some IFR conditions along the immediate west coast and the very northern part of the Panhandle. Marginal conditions through much of south central, the rest of the northern Panhandle, and much of the western part of the state. For Saturday afternoon, we see IFR conditions spreading into south central and north into the central interior. Some improvement along the immediate Aleutians to marginal conditions and VFR for most of the west coast. Some improvement within the Panhandle with mostly VFR, but still marginal and some IFR for the far northern parts of the Panhandle. Sunday morning, a lot of IFR out there everywhere from the Bering Sea into Bristol Bay and points northward from the Alaska Peninsula, south central for the northern Kenai Peninsula, eastward to the northern Panhandle, as well as much of the North Slope IFR conditions. But for Saturday afternoon, we'll see a lot of improvement, marginal conditions along the North Slope and down into the interior along the Canadian border, marginal conditions for the Aleutians as well as for much of the Panhandle, but IFR still from the northern parts of the Panhandle through south central and then again over that YK Delta area for Sunday afternoon. Taking a look at your pass forecasts for Saturday, AKwx Pass, VFR in the morning deteriorating to MVFR in the afternoon. Same thing at Adigan Pass. At Maryland Lake Clark passes, we'll see IFR all day on Saturday. MVFR deteriorating to IFR for Rainy Pass, and IFR all day Saturday at Windy Pass. Isabel Pass, MVFR deteriorating to IFR. At Mentasta Pass, MVFR all day. Tanita, IFR conditions, but we will see some MVFR right there at the east entrance in the afternoon. And then IFR at Portage and IFR at both Chilkoot and White Passes for Saturday. Looking at your freezing levels, surface freezing level extending from the southern Alaska Peninsula into the northern Gulf and to the immediate coastal Panhandle areas with warmer air coming up into the Aleutians. So Aleutian freezing levels anywhere from about 2,000 to almost 8,000 feet on Saturday. For icing, not much in the Aleutians, but for the rest of the state north to about the Brooks Range, some isolated moderate as well as for much of the Panhandle, above about 6,000 feet for south central and the Alaska Peninsula, above about 2,000 feet for the YK Delta area, and then below about 8,000 feet for much of the rest of the interior and between about 5,000 and 10,000 feet for the northern Panhandle. Taking a look at jet stream, we've got high pressure in the northern Pacific with our main jet arcing north of that high pressure system. So arcing right over the Aleutians, 150 to 165 knot winds over the Aleutians for the jet stream. A small jet over the interior of about 65 knots, and then 45 to increasing to about 70 knots off the Panhandle. For 9,000 foot winds on Saturday, we've got low pressure over the western Bering Sea with about 20 to 25 knots of wind on the south side of that low, increasing though as you get further south from that low, so that once we get down to about the Aleutians and points further south, anywhere from 50 to about 70 knot winds in that area. So those are going to be our highest winds for the Alaska region on Saturday at 9,000 feet. 20 to 25 knots into south central, about 40 knots, another small maximum over the central interior, just 10 to 20 knots over the northern parts of the state, and about 15 knots into the Panhandle. At 3,000 feet, we have that same low pretty much with a little bit stronger winds on the north side of the low at about 40 knots, but also increasing some as we get south of the low, so that we get 35 to 40 knots right over the western Aleutians, about 35 knots over the central Aleutians, and about 25 knots over the Alaska Peninsula and headed into south central. Just about 10 knots, 5 to 10 knots over the west coast, so not much wind there, and then about 15 knots into the Panhandle. So a lot of light winds over western Canada as well as western Alaska with that action around the low in the Bering Sea. Finally, taking a look at turbulence, we have some considerable moderate turbulence for much of the Aleutian chain from the south end of the Alaska Peninsula out to the western Aleutians, and that's going to be below about 5,000 feet for Saturday. Stay tuned for an educational segment.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider, and joining me again is Cindy Preller. She's the Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska Region's National Weather Service. Thanks again for joining us, Cindy.
Thanks for having me back, Dave.
Sure thing. And I love saying Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska's National Weather Service because that's not weather. Why is the Tsunami Program part of the National Weather Service?
Well, it's because the Weather Service absolutely rocks at warning people for every kind of, devastating natural hazard.
The mission of the Weather Service is to protect life and property. And so how does the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska, which is a very unique office, again, within the Weather Service, it's not weather, how do those folks help us protect life and property?
The National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer is a national warning center, and we analyze seismic traces 24/7 all around the world. So when there's an earthquake anywhere on the planet, we see it and analyze it within minutes.
Within minutes, and
Within
there's
minutes.
actually a goal to have it under, was it 5 minutes?
If there is a tsunami warning to be issued for continental America, we must get that out, or shoot to get that out in 5 minutes.
Okay. Now that's not something I have ever learned to do, so I know it would be a struggle for me to do that under probably hours, but it is fascinating to watch, and the office is open on a regular basis for tours, right?
Absolutely, come by Friday.
Okay.
Yep, every Friday at 1, 2, and 3 p.m. and they're open public free tours. And it's the most interesting place on the planet. You really should check it out.
Okay, and the office team is made up of people that are earth scientists, not meteorologists or atmospheric scientists. Talk about some of the types of people that work there.
Right, we are out of place in our National Weather Service, but we are geologists, geophysicists, oceanographers. We even have an astrophysicist on board, computer software architects, electronic technicians that are brilliant and innovative. Our software is all written in-house. Our instrumentation is designed in-house. So it's a really, really unique place, and it's just a couple handfuls of people that work there. So
sure.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ways to get a tsunami alert message is on Twitter.
Right.
And I can follow the Twitter address, and we'll put that up on the screen for you there. But it's usually a very quick message that tells you initially what the magnitude of an earthquake could be and about where its epicenter was. What are some of the other ways that you can get that alert message?
Well, Twitter's my favorite too.
Yeah.
And you don't even need a Twitter account to receive it. So
That's
it just comes in like an SMS message. But you can also receive it via email, weather radio, of course, the crawler on your television screen, on the internet, Google Alerts.
Right.
Marine radio if you're out in harbors and boats. Actually, marine radio is probably,
yeah, it is a good one.
That's our partnership with the Coast Guard. We're really grateful for that, absolutely. But there's a variety of ways in dissemination.
Okay.
And locally, excuse me, I'm sorry, but locally in the communities, the sirens will go off as well.
Right. So lots of different ways to get that very important message very quickly when that matters to you. One of the ways that the Warning Center practices with communities is a test on a yearly basis, right?
Right.
How does that work?
Thanks for bringing that up. It's a controversial issue, but it's super important to help us warn better and really serve Alaskans. So the week of March 27th, the commemoration of the 1964 event, for that week we have a Tsunami Preparedness Week every year. We like communities to get out and do drills and practice and do everything we can to raise awareness. And part of that is a live code test where we actually issue the warning message live and we activate the emergency alert system, which means sirens go off, the TV crawler happens, and it's a test.
We're doing everything that would normally happen without the real threat of the tsunami, just to practice as much as possible.
Right, and this is a major partnership with the State of Alaska, Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, the Emergency Operations Center, and the Alaska Broadcasters Association. Without the media, we wouldn't be able to do this. So the three groups really work tightly together to to do our best to warn, educate the public that this is happening, so they don't wonder and get scared about it. It has been remarkable what we've learned. I mean, it pretty much breaks somewhere every time, but then we fix it. And it gets better. So a quick example is just a few years ago, we used to, when we issued a message, it would activate the entire state. Right? I mean, Kotzebue, Nome, Bethel, everybody would be in tsunami warning. And so now we can regionalize it to where the actual event is taking place. That's pretty huge.
Right. So identifying points of failure and also points of success, and making sure we continue down that successful path so that folks are warned as quickly and accurately as possible.
Absolutely. And you know, to get our communities involved, to prep themselves, prep their businesses, prep their tourism, prep their schools, you know, just make this an annual thing they need to be doing.
Right. So as citizens wanting to be prepared, we should be prepared to learn more about that test that's happening usually toward the end of March every year.
Right, and you should be happy that it's happening.
Right.
Instead of upset. Definitely be happy that it's happening.
Right. Just as we test tornado sirens in tornado country, we also have to test the tsunami program as well.
Right, because there isn't enough time. You know, for a local tsunami, the wave will arrive in less than 2 minutes. So it's super important that people know what to do.
Very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for helping us know more about the Tsunami Ready program and the test. And the Tsunami Warning Center is a very unique and very important job in the National Weather Service that is just fascinating to me every time I visit the office. So
it's the only one for the continent. You really should come check it out.
It's an international effort.
Yes.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
And thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Now for a look at the sea ice edge. We see the sea ice has retracted a little bit to the north over the last 24 hours due to some southerly winds, but over the next few days we expect it to expand just a little bit further south to the west of St. Paul. Not a whole lot of change expected to the east of St. Paul over the next couple of days. We are looking at the potential for some southerly winds next week to shift the sea ice edge a little bit further north, but we have low confidence in that at this point. So stay tuned in the coming days for more details about that potential next week. Taking a look at southeast winds and seas, generally light winds out there for Saturday, 10 to 15 knots only. And then over the Gulf, seas 5 to 6 feet, so pretty small seas, even smaller over the inside waters, 2 to 3 feet for Saturday. Looking ahead to Sunday, winds picking up just a little bit, 20 to 25 knots over the Gulf, seas picking up as well a little bit, 7 to 8 feet, 10 to 20 knots generally out of a southerly direction for the inside waters. Seas picking up just a little bit there, 2 to 4 feet. For South Central, also light winds expected for Saturday, 10 to 15 knots across the board. Seas 4 to 5 feet over the Gulf waters, just 2 feet over Prince William Sound. Looking ahead into Sunday, winds pick up just a little bit, mostly over the northern Gulf, where we have southerly or easterly winds around 25 knots, still 10 to 15 knots for Cook Inlet and the northwestern Gulf. Seas 5 to 6 feet over the Gulf and just around 2 feet coming into Cook Inland, higher in Prince William Sound about 6 feet. For the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula, for Saturday, winds generally 15 to 25 knots out of the south and southwest. Out of the southeast, though, for our Shelikof Strait, seas 8 to 11 feet on the south side, on the Gulf side of the peninsula, and about 7 feet on the Bering Sea side. Looking ahead into Sunday, winds picking up just a little bit, so 20 to 30 knots generally out of the south. But westerly, some offshore flow there for Shelikof Strait. Seas picking up just a little bit, 7 to 10 feet on the Gulf side, still right around 7 feet on the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula. For the Aleutians, winds 25 to about 35 knots out in the western Aleutians, generally out of the west and southwest. Seas 12 feet on the south side of the Aleutians, 7 to 8 feet on the north side, and 12 to 14 feet for the western Aleutians on Saturday. As we go into Sunday, not a whole lot in the way of change winds may be coming down just a little bit. So winds 20 to 25 knots out of the southwest, a little bit of a northwesterly flow for the far western Aleutians. Seas coming down a little bit, 9 to 12 feet on the Pacific side and around 7 feet on the Bering Sea side. Still a little more elevated for the western Aleutians, 12 to 13 feet. Taking a look at the west coast, we have pretty light winds up in Norton Sound, just 5 knots out of the west, 15 to 20 knots elsewhere, and about 5 to 6 feet right along that sea ice edge in the Bering Sea. For Saturday, winds increasing a little bit, 15 knots out of the north up in Norton Sound, 20 to 30 knots further south along the west coast. And again, that northerly direction may help push the sea ice a little bit further south, particularly west of St. Paul. Seas, not much change on Sunday, still 7 to 8 feet near the ice edge. For the Arctic coast, very light winds along the north slope, 5 knots, just 10 to 15 knots along the western side of the state, generally out of the northwest, but a little bit all over the place due to that light flow. Looking into Sunday, 10 knots across the northern slope out of the north and west, and then along the western portion of the state, 10 to 15 knots with 20 knots out of the north coming out of the Bering Strait. Reviewing the weather for tonight, we've got low pressure way out over in the western Aleutians, and that's going to be bringing some winds in, but all of these fronts that we're seeing here, the occluded front, cold front, and warm front, are all dissipating at this point. So there's not a lot of very elevated winds associated with this. Also low pressure with a trough over the southwestern portion of the state. Thanks so much for watching Alaska TV Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.